Welcome to TRB, everybody. It is the Resistance broadcast. Welcome to our Monday show. It's time to get into discussions about our favorite movie franchise ever. But this time, James and I are going to try to figure out, maybe we're going to disagree, maybe we'll agree on some things. What's the most rewatchable Star Wars movie of each of the three trilogies? So we're not talking Rogue One, Solo, Clone Wars. We're talking prequel, OT, sequels. And it might not even be, James, it might not even be the best of movie of each trilogy, just the most rewatchable, which for me, I already know there's some that don't fit both categories. So I think it'll be a fun discussion. Are you going into this fully realized on your choice, or is this something that you think might come to you as we talk about it?
Well, John, anytime you ever pitch questions, I go, well, it depends on what you mean. Right. And you always hate that. But I'm like, it depends on what angle we're looking at certain things from. So,
yeah,
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. And for anyone who is either catching up on the pod or whatever, make sure you check out last week's episode. We had actually another discussion, which we usually don't do on our live shows, but Lacey has been sort of cutting back her time a little bit, not for any bad reasons, just taking some personal time. Obviously, she's pregnant, and there's a lot going on in her life. So she's just doing the live shows, and me and James are going to hold the fort down for the discussion show. So you can always keep finding Lacey, obviously, on all the social media apps at Lacey Gilleran to send her your love. But
TikTok,
be sure
it's Lacey Gilleran.
Right. But be sure to watch our other shows. You know, not a lot of pods put out 2 episodes a week, so you still get a healthy dose of Gilleran on a week-to-week basis. But James, we are here to talk about that debatable topic. But before we do that, how you doing? How's your Cincinnati football club doing? What's going on? Are they in the playoffs yet? Is it the season coming to an end? I don't know anything about MLS.
We're not there yet, as far as like playoffs, but I would find it hard to believe if they wouldn't make the playoffs. I don't really know at what point like you're like guaranteed in because you've got enough points. But the place we're at right now is that basically the whole season is shut down while we do Leagues Cup, which is beyond MLS. MLS is just a competitor in like sort of a local tournament of a couple different countries and different leagues. And they've already done the first round, which was sort of like I don't know what they call it, like not a knockout. They call them like grouping, like where you have like 3 teams.
Oh, like a World Cup does?
I'm not sure because I'm so new to sports. Like all this stuff is new to me, but it's like 3 teams and then these 2 play each other, those 2 play each other, and then these 2 play each other. And then whoever had the most points out of that, whoever had the least gets knocked out. And then they move into the real bracket.
Yep.
So, there's sort of 3 things going on right now. We're at the top of the MLS. We are still in the competition for Open Cup and we are still in the competition for Leagues Cup. So those are the 3 there. And when it comes to the regular season, who knows about like MLS Cup, but being at the top of the league means that we're the number 1 leader for Supporters Shield, which is, in my opinion, the better trophy.
Wow. That's pretty cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, they are absolutely crushing it. And I'm told that after the season is over, I should probably get out of sports because it will never, ever be like that again because your team always loses. So if you get into sports and your team goes like all the way and wins or whatever, like quit.
Well, and that didn't used to always be the case with the Yankees, but right now they are in shambles in every way imaginable.
Out of the teams, do they rank, like, are you like number 20 out of 23
in their division? The Yankees are in last place right now.
They're in last.
Yeah, they're 4 games out of a wild card spot for the playoffs, so they still can make the playoffs, but they are a mess in structurally, management, front office. It's a real.
Do you guys
mess.
have an equivalent of like what we call Supporter Shield, where it's like regardless of if you make the playoffs and you happen to like do well in the playoffs and win the World Series or whatever, do you have something that like they sort of give a trophy to who was like very clearly the best team of the league because they won the most games or something?
No.
No? Okay. I think that's the better trophy.
Oh, I don't. You got to win it all. It's all about
That would be
championship.
winning it all. That's why I think that's better to say this season we performed better than any other team. Technically, we stumbled at like those last few games or whatever, which, you know, like you could be the best team all the way leading up and just have one bad game at the very last game. But baseball is different too, because you play like 7 games per team. Yeah, that's weird.
People don't remember the teams that lose the championship. People remember the champions. So, especially in baseball and other American sports, footballs, no one remembers Super Bowl losers. They remember who wins.
Right. I think that's still the case for soccer. I think most people look at MLS Cup as the top one, but I don't get that. I think the Supporter Shield's a better. Hit me up in the comments, whoever knows what the heck I'm even talking about.
Yeah, I mean, soccer's weird in that way, but I by the time this comes out, I went to the Yankee game. Too. I went to the Yankee game on Saturday with my brother, my sister, and my mom. So I don't know if they won or lost because we're recording this before that. And I also was at a concert Friday. I went to Metallica and Pantera at MetLife.
You had a weekend.
So hopefully I had a good time. Anyway, James, we're going to do Will of the Force. And we are, again, 2 weeks in a row to show our love for our patrons. We're doing an all-exclusive Patreon Will of the Force.
Absolutely. So let's get into it.
I fear nothing, for all is as the Force wills it.
As John mentioned, it is very important that we are doing an all Patreon episode because we love our patrons. And if you love the show and want to continue to support, or not continue to support, but you want to support, you should probably look at doing that through Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/resistance broadcast. There you can start supporting us at just $5 a month, which is the major level. And at that particular level, you can start submitting questions to this very topic. But or to this very section of the show, Will of the Force. But of course, you know, if you want to move up, you can and be more engaged and do more things on the Patreon. We do a lot over there, including the Discord, which people really like. So if you want to, if that's interesting, if that sounds cool to you, head over to patreon.com/resistance broadcast and check it out. Let's get started with the first one this week from one of our patrons. This one is coming from Commander Michael Lederer. I believe that's correct.
Well, Michael, let us know if it's wrong. We'll say it right next time.
We'll try to do our best there. Yeah. Michael, thanks for submitting the question. He wanted to know, will we see Batuu in live action? With Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew lined up for release, do you think we will see them on Batuu in either show? And are you surprised that we haven't seen Batuu yet in anything so far? John, where are you at in this? Because I feel like I remember when Galaxy's Edge came out that you were very like, they're going to obviously do this and it's all connected and it's kind of dumb. Is that where you were? I don't know.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm not going to say we'll never see Batuu in live action. I don't think we are yet. I don't think Ahsoka or Skeleton Crew will feature in Batuu. Was Skeleton Crew filmed the same way that Ahsoka and Mando was? Was that in the Stagecraft Studios?
Oh gosh, you're the person I should be asking.
I know. I feel weird that I don't know. But anyway, that I
wanted to say that I felt like we had heard that there was filming going on at Batuu at some point, like at night or something.
I'm just gonna say no. I don't think we'll see. Well, this is tough because he asked a bunch of questions. Will we see Batuu and Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew? No. Will we see Batuu in live action one day? Maybe.
I think we will see Batuu in live action for sure. I'm not positive about this. I think that at some point, I think the thing is that when it first got announced, we were like, oh, okay. And then Disney Plus, and they're doing all these other shows. All of this is just synergy for them having the opportunity to shoot in this and trying to say, you think the Mandalorian's cool? Well, now the Mandalorian is a Batuu, and you should go to Batuu as well because he's cool and you could be cool too. And so far, I feel like they've done a good job at sort of staying away from that and not making it like an obvious advertisement. There are other things that they do with books and the Star Cruiser and other things like that they've connected through a way to make your visit about Galaxy's Edge and all that, but they haven't really done it in like actually live action format yet. Right. It almost makes me feel like Batuu would have been a better candidate or would have come first before, say, the Star Cruiser. Like, don't you, which one would you have felt better about? Like if Mandalorian has an episode where he went to Batuu, or Mandalorian has an episode where he had to take the Star Cruiser?
Well, I feel like wasn't he almost on something that was like the Star Cruiser when he was traveling somewhere in, was it Book of Boba Fett? Yeah. I feel like that was very similar, but I think I would feel better if it was the planet.
Yeah, me too.
It feels less like a novelty, even though it's a theme park thing.
I know. That's why I think it makes sense, and I feel like they've done enough time to space it out and say, if a character does show up, my thing with it is the one that feels the most right at this point was if Ahsoka was there, because I feel like bringing Ahsoka to the park would be very similar to bringing Mando and Boba Fett and stuff.
Well, also the difference for me on, I don't say it's the grossness of it, but like the Star Cruiser, you either go there or you're not there. Whereas you can go to Hollywood Studios and not go to Galaxy's Edge. It's not just like you have to pay to go to Galaxy's Edge. Whereas the Cruiser's like, come to the Star Cruiser. This is it. You're either coming here or you're not. So I think that's also a big difference for me. But I don't know. Did you answer though? Did you sort of said maybe we'll see it, but do you?
I think Batuu shows up in live action at some point, and I feel like because they've taken such a good enough time that it'll feel cool again, and it won't feel like the obvious advertisement. As far as Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew, I think both of those probably are not. I was trying to Google really quickly. I see a picture of somebody saying, I said back in October they might try and film it, Batuu. This is interesting, and they have like a photo and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like there was something about they were filming maybe at Batuu one late night, but I can't really pull up anything off the top.
But you also have to answer without. Oh
yeah, no, I don't. I'm saying I don't think they will show up in Ahsoka or Skeleton Crew.
Oh, Skeleton Crew did film in Los Angeles, so it was the same filming style as Ahsoka and.
Yeah, man, it looks so much better than Ahsoka just based on the trailers.
But we never know.
I know. And the other thing too is I saw the one trailer.
Yeah.
You know,
on a big
one
screen
time
in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
all right.
All right. Next one is from another one of our patrons. This time the question comes from Major Derek Smith. Thank you,
Thanks,
Derek. Derek wanted to know, will we get a flashback in Ahsoka, showing a de-aged Baylan and Anakin? It would be great to get a new live-action Clone Wars action sequence. I'm going to start this off where I may or may not have missed this sort of connection between Baylan and Anakin. I know that on Thursday's episode or Wednesday's episode of TRB Live, we talked about it was in the data bank, I think, that Baylan and Anakin like knew each other or something along those lines. Can you fill me in on that? Do you know off the top of your head where that's coming from?
I'm seeing, no, I remember hearing that, but I'm not positive as to where that was. Yeah, I'm not really positive.
All right. Well, that being said, maybe while John searches around, I'll answer the question. I don't think we're going to get a de-aged Anakin specifically, which means I think this whole kind of idea is probably out. Number one, we had the opportunity to de-age Hayden Christensen and it didn't happen.
There you go.
So that's one thing. Now, while I would love to see this relationship between Baylan and Anakin, if there really was one. Like, how did that work out? Was Baylan a little bit more like, are they going to build on the storyline of Anakin turning by Baylan being like, it's not always bad to do the thing that you have in your heart, your passion or something,
James,
and he
real
sort
quick,
of leads them down that line. What's up?
that main trailer, I guess we both forgot this, but that main Ahsoka trailer, Baylan tells Ahsoka that her old master, Anakin Skywalker, always spoke highly of her. So they knew each other. We just don't know in what capacity.
Oh, okay. So that's where it's coming from.
Yep. So it's legit. It's in the trailer, but it's vague because we don't know how they knew each other. Doesn't mean they were friends. There's, you could speak highly of somebody to an adversary.
You could also speak highly of someone publicly.
Right. Without even it being a private conversation. Yeah.
No, yeah. Well, what I'm saying is like if Anakin had in some way, shape, or form sort of publicly been like, oh, she's the best, like she's awesome or whatever, and Baylan as like an audience member was learning Ahsoka through him, but never actually knew Anakin. So I guess we don't know for sure, but that clearly implies that they had talked and stuff. So. Yeah. It's an interesting aspect. I don't think we're going to get that. I think Star Wars usually, because I love a good flashback, I think it usually works best when you tell somebody about the past instead of showing them the past. Mm-hmm. And it forces us to say, well, when are we going to get that story? And I want to know more about that thing, like you fought in the Clone Wars. Like, well, when are we going to get that? As opposed to the New Hope being like, well, I know, but it was not like in the show. They were like, your father was a great warrior. Right. It's like, they're out there and they're like fighting in the Clone Wars. Like, we didn't get it. You just were told about it. And you were told that they had this relationship. So I think that's where it works the best. And I'm going to say no, Derek, unfortunately, even though I think it would be cool. I like it when they do that sometimes. Yep. What do you think?
You hit on the point I was going to make about the budget. Well, you didn't specifically say budget, but you just said they had a chance to de-age Hayden Christensen for Obi-Wan and they didn't do it, really. They really didn't. So besides giving him like the haircut, wig or whatever. But I think de-aging is very expensive. I don't know the budget that went into all of these shows. We heard about the budget that went into Andor. We heard about the pre-production budget for Acolyte. We don't know how much they put a budget behind Ahsoka. And I'm just trying to think, like, Dave Filoni doing this, would he spend time and budget knowing that there would be budget taken away from something else to tell a flashback between Anakin and this guy? I don't think so. And for the reason that we're not even sure that they even really knew each other, like we just talked about. And it just costs a lot. You would have to de-age both of them, and you would have to have done heavy de-aging for Ray Stevenson, who was an older guy. Not old, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I don't think so. It's a very good question, Derek, so don't get us wrong there, but I don't think so either.
I don't doubt that de-aging someone is expensive, but it does make you wonder, how expensive is it really? Because like, I know it's not the same thing, but like you can do that on a phone, and in a lot of cases too, like
not if you want it to look good.
I think you'd be surprised sometimes what is out there that is like believable. Although it's not as good, you could take it up that extra level. But even people that have done it just on YouTube, like, oh, they didn't de-age Anakin, so I'll do it. And then they put on YouTube side by side and it looks pretty good. And that's not coming from somewhere who has even remote studio budget. That's just coming from a creator on his home PC with a couple things, here and there, and a little bit of know-how. So to think that the people, at ILM or whatever would be like, well, in order to do this right, it's going to cost $50,000. And then they're like, well, then we just won't do it. But it's like, why does it cost $50,000 when people are capable of doing it maybe 98% of the way
But don't
And
forget
it's
what Hal
almost
Hickel
more
told us.
believable than like, even if the special effects weren't perfect, most people would have rather had the not perfect special effect than a not de-aged Hayden Christensen, you know?
Sure, but also let's not forget what Hal Hickel told us, which is like a lot of these people who changed our finished product were adding onto our finished product.
Right.
So
And that's fine. But in this case with Hayden Christensen, that's not the case.
it
So
is because
no, it isn't. No, it's not. Because in
Yes,
the
it
case
is.
that, okay, well, let's uncover it real quick. Because in that case, I believe that what he was referring to is when someone like Corridor Crew
I
fixes
know what you're saying.
Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill, who was already de-aged and re-put in,
Yep.
and they already did all that work. In this case, that's just Hayden Christensen's face. There's no work that's already been done by
But
ILM.
you're forgetting that they already had the performance, they already had the hair done, they already had the lighting shot, everything to create that around everything outside of this
Yeah.
was already done. The performance by the actor. So
But I'm saying why
You
they
can
decided to not spend the extra amount of money to do the extra little bit on his face but somebody just with a home computer went the extra mile with the extra little bit on his face, and fans would prefer that.
all I'm saying is the Hayden thing
I'm getting
might
into
be-
a semantics about the
yeah,
cost.
the
but
Hayden thing might be easier because Hayden Christensen still looks relatively young for his age in terms of facially. You add Ray Stevenson, that's just another body.
Right.
You're talking about how do you bring that guy down? It's easier to age someone from 38 to down to 22 or whatever, but a 60-year-old to age him down to 30 or 40 is a different animal. So there's just a lot that goes into it. I for many reasons, I just don't think this is we're gonna see this. So.
Yep, and I agree. All right, one last one before we get into that discussion. This one is coming from one of our patrons, Commander Alex. Commander Alex wanted to know, they sent in the question, with Mando Season 3 showing both Hux, which of course we're talking about the older Hux, Brendel Hux, and name-dropping Project Necromancer, will we be seeing more of the First Order or even Exogol in future shows and or Dave's New Republic movie? John, start this one off. What do you think?
I think we already have. I think we've seen sort of the seeds of the First Order in a sense. So it depends on how much you're talking about, Alex. It's definitely a good question. I don't think we're going to see the Mandoverse and this stuff used in a way the Clone Wars was used to add credence or strength to the prequels. I think you're just going to see the logical foundation as it's being built without it being like, we're going to really show why the First Order is great so that you like the sequels more or something, which I think the Clone Wars helped people like reconcile stuff with the Clone Wars did stuff that helped people reconcile things with the prequels. I don't think we'll see Exogol. We might, but I don't know about in one of Dave's things. I'd be surprised if we see like Thrawn was at the same spot that Palpatine was. But I do think we will see some First Order stuff just because logically there has to be foundation somewhere, and there's sort of loose ends tied with the cloning aspect. And is that all about Palpatine? Like, we're not sure how close they're going to get to it, but I think we'll see some First Order stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're agreeing on the fact that there's going to be First Order stuff, but I was taking your thing as sort of a no, but there will be First Order. I'm saying yes. I think this does make sense to me, that Dave would be bringing in some of that stuff to do exactly what he already did with the Clone Wars, filled in the gaps, made things make sense. You kind of saw it like a reconciliation with the prequels. And I sort of think it's all in the same thing, all in the same vein here. I think that bringing in those characters and showing us that stuff, which doesn't really need to happen, it sort of is happening because there's a plan. And when you're looking at, when we finally get to that movie, let's say the movie is Thrawn and this is the final stand and Thrawn dies in that movie or whatever. I think at some point everybody goes, what about the First Order? So you have to have that in there as, you know, you're sort of introducing some of this stuff being like, well, there's the remnants of the Empire, but there's also this stuff that's going on over there, which we all know is what led to Palpatine and Exogol and the Final Order and all that other stuff. I think that stuff, while, you know, maybe there's an argument for that detracts from the story that we're trying to tell, which is about Thrawn and his whole thing. I think it's all perfectly intertwined. And man, what was it? We got another Will of the Force question about Grand Admiral
Ray Sloan.
Ray Sloan. I had it in my head, and then I finished the sentence, and by the time I got to the end of the sentence, I'd forgotten it again. Ray Sloan, and I don't think she will be involved in Ahsoka, but the whole, all the bigger picture of the Mandoverse and the different shows and it all leading up to a movie, I feel like this is a very strong way for them to be like, look, there was the Empire, then we showed you the First Order, and all of this stuff is the middle stuff. It's the Empire falling and turning into the First Order. So even though Thrawn's involved and he's representing the Empire, I think we're still going to get a lot of the other side of that, which is like sort of looking at this whole thing as a sequel, prequel, if you will.
I disagree, but I hear what you're saying. I just don't know that
First Order, Empire prequel setup.
Yeah, I don't know that Favreau and Filoni are interested in everything that they're doing being served as some sort of supplemental prologue to the sequel trilogy. I think it's going to be a matter of circumstance that the First Order has to be being developed at this time.
Yeah, that's
but
fair.
I do see your point. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well,
good questions though. Good questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Alex, Derek, and Michael. I'll have to send those in. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our discussion.
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
All right. What is the most rewatchable movie from each Star Wars trilogy? 3 trilogies, 3 movies in each, but which from each is the most rewatchable? Now, we'll go through each trilogy, talk it out to try to determine which movie from each that you are tossing on the most often on a rainy Saturday. Never get tired of it. Always easy to digest. However you define rewatchable. And I know for me, for certain, there's going to be some that might not be my favorite of a trilogy, but I feel are more rewatchable. It might not be the best movie of a trilogy, but it's more rewatchable. So, James, let's start with the prequel trilogy. Do you have one on the top of your mind that you're like, this one is one I could always throw on, always watch, easy to digest, it feels fresh, that sort of thing? Or are you in a gray area where you're not sure, or it depends? Because I feel pretty certain on mine, so I'm curious what you think.
Well, I think it definitely depends, because if someone was good enough to go back and look at all the clips over the years we've been doing this, I'm sure that I've probably answered all 3 of the movies as the one I go back and rewatch. I think if there's a bigger truth to it, the one that I really honestly do probably put on the most is Phantom Menace.
That's mine.
And I think the other side of that, which this logic will carry over into the other movies, is the one that I tend to like the least, because I feel like there's things in it that I maybe don't understand, and maybe if I paid attention or tried to find something about it this time, some of those pieces might come together a little bit better.
I need to come to terms with some of this, because I'm starting to think in my head right now that part of what makes some of these movies rewatchable for me more than others is a reminder of, and it's ironic because we talked about nostalgia last week, a reminder of how I felt when I first watched that movie. Like that creeps in, and that to me adds to rewatchability for things. So that's a part of it. I'm not saying it's all of it. But for me, Phantom Menace feels, I mean, there's and this is an aspect for me, like there's a heaviness to Revenge of the Sith that sometimes feels like just a gigantic meal, and sometimes you just, want a nice snack. And there's heaviness to Phantom Menace for sure. The last act, I mean, everything with Qui-Gon, his death was one of the darker things we had seen in Star Wars to that point. So it's not all just a fun ride. But something about the Phantom Menace just feels very pure George Lucas. The pod race we talked about last week at length is just something you feel like he just had a good time making. And also the fact that, that movie was made without George Lucas feeling pressured to do better than the last one because of how Phantom Menace was received. So a lot of the cultural elements of it also add to my rewatchability, but I think what it comes down to for me, for the Phantom Menace being more rewatchable than Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith is because I just enjoy the movie more, and I feel it moves nicely, and that sometimes it's that simple for me.
So I think I don't usually get turned away from something if it's too heavy. So I'm not putting on the Phantom Menace because it's light and easy. I think I'm putting on Phantom Menace because it, especially in this trilogy, it feels like it's the most separated. Actually, what's funny about that too is that sort of happens in the sequel trilogy. Yeah. We'll get that as well, in a way. But to me, I kind of feel like Phantom Menace is the closest thing we have to a sort of separated story while still being part of the 9. And I think that's probably because of, you're right, Hayden Christensen, the Anakin character. You've got Qui-Gon, you've got Jar Jar Binks as like, I mean, I know he's in the other ones, but he's not really, You've got just this sort of different world where, the war hasn't started and all this, and, I don't know.
The Duel of the Fates, like I got it in my opinion.
Yeah, that's just an element of the movie. I'm saying, but just in general, for some reason, like I feel like there's one, and then like 10 years later, there's the rest of them, or somehow. Yeah. I know that doesn't even make sense, but
it does. I mean, Hayden Christensen's a big draw for today. Like he gets these huge crowd pops and stuff, and he's just not a part of the Phantom Menace. And here we are, both of us saying the Phantom Menace is the most rewatchable.
Phantom Menace almost feels like Rogue One to the original trilogy in a weird way.
Yeah. And also the Liam Neeson factor has to play a part because I thought he was excellent in the Phantom Menace, and we don't get him in the next two. Obi-Wan fills that role, and he does great. So on one hand, here we are talking 2023, where arguably two, if not the two most popular Star Wars actors right now, if you go to Celebration and you listen to those crowd pops, are Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen. And both of them are in 2 and 3, have bigger roles in 2 and 3, of course, Ewan, because in episode 1, Obi-Wan really is kind of a small role.
Right.
Aside from the end, when he has to sort of like step up and take the mantle and defeat Maul, he's there on the
fill in dialogue.
Scene. Yeah, he's not in there that much, and he doesn't like. There's not a lot of like Obi-Wan lines in the Phantom Menace where you're like, that's a great Obi-Wan line.
It's over 20,000.
Yeah.
Even, and if you didn't look closely, I said 10,000, but you heard 20,000.
Yeah. Even Master Yoda doesn't have a count that high. Yeah. So. It shouldn't be, but for me, the Phantom Menace is, and definitely I have to admit that part of that is I will always remember the moments, leading up to that, and that fills me with a good feeling. And for me, a lot of times rewatchability, I think there's two big things. One, Usually the movie makes me feel good. It's like comforting. And 2, it moves, and the Phantom Menace moves. Like they are never really in one spot for a long period of time. It bops around a lot to different characters and situations. They literally move on to different locations. Like the place they were the longest, I think, had to have been Tatooine. But then in the middle of that, you get that 15-minute race, which is amazing. Yeah. It's a nice breakup. So I feel like the Phantom Menace cruises pretty well, and I think that and changes scenery a lot. And I think that bodes well for rewatchability for a movie, just in general.
Yeah. I actually don't really think that the end of Phantom Menace was too ambitious and they were doing too much. I feel like it cuts like Return of the Jedi.
I agree.
You've got multiple battles and I'm like bopping between them. And at no point, we've seen in some of the documentaries, at no point did I ever feel like I'm like, now where am I?
Yeah,
I'm like, I know exactly where we're at the whole time. I'm totally with this.
You get your space battle, you get your lightsaber duel, and you get your ground battle, and that's exactly what you get in Return of the Jedi. So
about the Qui-Gon factor too is I recently rewatched Obi-Wan Kenobi, and when I got to the end, I was thinking about Qui-Gon. Spoiler alert, and I started thinking about, is Qui-Gon? There's sort of 2 scales here. You got to follow with me. Is he the smallest important character out of all the 9 movies that made the biggest impact?
Well, he's 6'5".
So not what I mean.
Oh,
but so obviously, like other people had bigger impacts, like Anakin Skywalker, right? But he is a bigger character, like, you know what I mean? So he's like, out of all of the Star Wars, the 9 movies, who made the biggest impact with the least amount of like presence? And I was trying to think, I was like, Jabba the Hutt? And I was like, no, because even his impact is sort of small in the context of that. Like Qui-Gon finding Anakin and like presenting him to Obi-Wan and all that.
Impact to the story, not
to the 9 movies as a whole.
I was about to say Boba Fett, just because of like, if you were talking about from a fan perspective, because that guy literally did nothing and he was people's favorite character. So,
no, you know what though? Good argument here might be Jango Fett. Didn't do a whole lot, but really impacted the story.
Yeah.
That's a good argument. Yeah.
That's tough. Yeah. Qui-Gon's good. It's funny if there's no prequels, I think the answer to that would be Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's only in New Hope.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He dies.
It's the same thing. Yeah. It's a sort of repeat.
Right. But because of the prequel. So if they made a prequel trilogy about Qui-Gon, then we couldn't pick him. So Qui-Gon's a great pick for that. That's a good one. I'd have to meditate on this. I will.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So let's move to the original trilogy.
Yeah, let's do that. Now, this one I think is the trickiest for me.
Oh, okay. So do you want me to start? Because I think I have a pretty definitive pick.
Okay.
Return of the Jedi.
Right.
I think a lot of that, and The Empire Strikes Back.
Surprised by your answer.
Empire Strikes Back is my favorite Star Wars movie. Mm-hmm. And I also love A New Hope. But I think what makes Return of the Jedi so rewatchable is it doesn't necessarily move a lot, but there's a lot to absorb in a lot of the scenes where, sort of like our conversation last week of, did you see that? You know, you can watch Return of the Jedi and find new things all the time. And you can't always do that in Empire or A New Hope. You can, but not as much as Return of the Jedi. So, and I think that opening sequence where you get the 3 main heroes together again, which they tried to do with Rise of Skywalker for the first time in that trilogy. They get Han, Luke, and Leia back together again. It's this swashbuckling, amazing opening sequence that's about 25 minutes or so, I think. So you're looking at about a quarter of the movie, and it really is just such a fun scene to watch. That whole entire sequence on Tatooine with Jabba's palace and Jabba's sail barge. Luke does his thing, Han's doing his thing, Leia's doing her thing. They're all separated, sort of, but they're all still together for the main cause. And just, I think that scene alone is supremely rewatchable. And then you go from there. Luke goes to Yoda. That's incredible. And then you get the whole Endor scene, Death Star, Vader, Palpatine. It's just Return of the Jedi. It ties everything up nicely and ends that trilogy in a beautiful way. Whereas, Empire has it's slower. Like, we're on Hoth for a long time. Luke's with Yoda for a long time. Han and Leia are going through space for a while. There's a lot of like slow stuff, but it's purposefully slow to build up the characters and help them with their arcs. So in my opinion, it's the best Star Wars movie, but for rewatchability, I think Return of the Jedi just gives you so much to watch every time. It's just, there's a lot to it and it's fun. There's just so many aspects of that movie that if I was looking at, the 3 movies on my shelf, and say we're going physical media here, I'm just like, oh man, I want to watch one of these Star Wars movies. Which one I want to watch? I'm probably grabbing Return of the Jedi, even though it's not my favorite out of the original trilogy. So that's where I'm at. It's clear. It's a clear cut pick to me. Phantom Menace, I was pretty sure, but for this one, Return of the Jedi is definitely, in my opinion, my most rewatchable original trilogy movie. So I'm not sure where you're at, but you said you were surprised. But did you think I was going to pick Empire?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Just because you are a Han guy, and I feel like Han is the best represented in Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, definitely.
He's got some good stuff in A New Hope, and I feel like he sort of lacks in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
But in Empire Strikes Back, it's sort of like what, we talk about, like the sequel trilogy. Well, like, this one's Han's movie, this one's Luke's movie, this one's Leia's movie. Like, if you were to sort of break that out, I feel like Han in Empire Strikes Back, like that one is really like where he shines.
Yeah.
So I would have thought that would have been your answer. For me, this brings into something I didn't go into full detail on the last one, but sometimes I look at, like, I'm like, which one do I want to watch? And there's one that always feels like, to me, like I could go back and revisit that one, and like I'd find it's like my least favorite, but I kind of like maybe could find some other angle to like sort of love it a little bit more. So I always want to like give it that chance, and I still like them. So, you know what I mean? I go to that one. That one for me is A New Hope in this case. But then the Empire Strikes Back is the one that I think is the best one. And then there's Return of the Jedi, which I think is my favorite one.
Right.
So I'm stuck between, in any situation where I go, which one of the original trilogy do I want to put on today? It's like the one that I want to like sort of study and give not another shot, but you know what I mean? Like maybe I could enjoy it and it'll bring it up a little bit. Or do I want to go with the one that's clearly the best? Or do I want to go with the one that just like makes me feel good and like I love it? So this one's tricky for me. I think the real answer, though, that if I was like, which one am I going to throw on? I think I would tend to land with Return of the Jedi the most often.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we're 2 for 2.
Right. But for very similar reasons of why I like the Return of the Jedi. But I will say this, that I think that it goes up for me, whereas I think like a lot of people think of the Jabba stuff as like, peak Return of the Jedi. I think of the end. The end is totally where it all is for me. It's the battle, the space battle is perfection. The Ewoks and the all that. It's all so good, the way they balance between them. I love everything about the end of that movie. I love Jabba too, but I almost feel like Return of the Jedi, for me, sort of in a weird way, I feel like Return of the Jedi starts after Jabba, and Jabba's this weird like bonus short that we got.
I could see how you could see it that way, yeah.
It ties in. It's like they released it before the movie and it was this promotional piece between the two movies. But then when you go in to Return of the Jedi, it starts with Luke being like, I'm on my way to go see Yoda again. You're like, oh, okay. Now the serious stuff is beginning to take place of how all of this is going to wrap up.
Very ambitious of George Lucas to make a 90-minute movie to finish this trilogy.
Yeah.
No, I see what you're saying there. And I agree. The ending is pinnacle because it has the fun, but it also takes everything. The stakes are higher and it takes everything to the next level. Like Luke's, crossroads moment and throwing away the lightsaber. That's heavy duty stuff. And obviously him and Vader and what Vader does. And like that, it's Return of the Jedi has it all. And, we're not here to sell on why these movies are great. And look, all these movies are very rewatchable. We are a Star Wars podcast and Star Wars fans, and we love all of them. But like, you look at A New Hope and how that starts compared to Return of the Jedi, and it's like A New Hope starts off really slow. And I know it would be very hard for me to sit my son down and say like, all right, it's time for you to watch Star Wars and start with A New Hope, because it's a lot of 3PO and R2 slowly moving through the desert, and it's a slow get going until you get to the cantina.
Talked to you guys about it really, but Bennett, we went to this we went to our local baseball stadium, and they did a Star Wars night, and we watched Star Wars. So it was me, Rachel, and Bennett, and we watched it on their big screen and stuff. And it was the first time he sat down and watched Star Wars and asked questions, and we talked through it all.
What was it?
A New Hope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was Star Wars. Yeah. And
look at this purist over here.
Well, I'm just saying that when I was saying that, I was saying it was
No, yeah.
Star Wars, yeah. But the thing is that he had the same opinion he does about any other Star Wars stuff. He knows what it is, but it doesn't drive him to be like, that was so cool. And then there's the part where this happened and this happened. He just sort of looked at it and, he had some funny answers, which I don't think he fully understands the words that he's saying, but we were kind of like, did you like it? And he's like, it's okay, kind of thing. And I think he likes it more than what he's leading on, but he's also trying to say it's not my favorite. I love other things way more than that.
So you are Ted trying to see what's her name's reaction and disappointed that she's not oohing and awing at certain scenes.
I'm actually not disappointed in here's the other
that's How I Met Your Mother for our audience, by the way.
I don't particularly think that the chances that he's going to love something the same way I love it. I don't expect him to like Dragon Ball. I don't necessarily expect him to like Star Wars. I just am kind of whatever he does get into will be cool. And, I'll probably get into that thing too, so that we have that shared interest, but I don't need him to like what I like.
I'm the same way. Yeah. Johnny hasn't, he's not even 5 yet. He's going to be 5 later this month,
which is weird. He's going to kindergarten this year, right?
Yeah.
See, that's strange. Bennett is starting kindergarten and he's not 6.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're a whole year younger than me, but grade wise, they're both going into the same grade together.
Cool. So Johnny, I think he wants to make me think he likes Star Wars because he wants to make me happy. It's kind of cute in that way, but I don't want him to feel that way. So when he gets to Star Wars and wants to really sit down and absorb it, if he likes it, that's amazing, and that'll be something we could bond over. But I'm never going to push it on him, and I haven't. He knows obviously what I do, and I talk about Star Wars, and he gets all that. He sees all the posters, and he sees this Chewie doll, and all. He gets it all, and he has some Star Wars.
It's pretty impossible for a kid to walk into a room like what we have, see all of the Star Wars stuff, and be like, "Why does Dad have a lot of one franchise thing?"
Right. Yeah, and I'm not sure if he's going to love it or not, but he does sort of like you're saying with Bennett, have this understanding of it, but he hasn't He hasn't dived into it yet, so
Right.
we'll see. But in terms of, I know we're getting off the beaten path here though, but it is a point to be said. Like I'm saying from my perspective, what's rewatchable, but I think it's good to get an idea of like kids too, because we live in this day and age now where attention spans are shorter and shorter, and it'd be hard to see a 5-year-old really sit down and watch 3PO and R2 slowly move through the deserts of Tatooine without much background, and dialogue probably over their heads a bit and that sort of stuff. But you throw on Return of the Jedi, you maybe have a better shot. What's that giant slug puppet? What's that big Rancor monster? What's those green frog looking dudes? And Luke Skywalker, he's got this green lightsaber. Like it's so inviting. And like, but for me, it also plays because I am like, oh, it's Jabba. Oh, it's the Rancor. Oh my God, I remember playing with those figures and stuff. And that seeps into it too for rewatchability. So there's a lot of factors for me on why things are rewatchable. But I just really think, like, to close out my point on the original trilogy is Return of the Jedi just has a lot. And like you said, the end even takes it to the next level. And it's not that it moves the way the Phantom Menace does, where it's like, we're here, now we're here, then we're here, then we're here. Like Lawrence Kasdan likes to like talk about Solo. He's like, that movie moves and we cruise and we keep going and we give you something fun, then we on to the next one. Return of the Jedi, you're on Tatooine, then you're on Endor. And that's pretty much, and then space, and that's pretty much it, and the Death Star, but it still moves around a lot between the stories. And like you brought up about the end with the Phantom Menace, you got the space battle, you got the lightsaber duel, and you got the ground game with Naboo, but you never feel like, what am I watching? A fight scene from Jason Bourne? Like you're like, no, I get exactly what's happening here, and the same thing happens in Return of the Jedi, and maybe that's the magic sauce because we picked Phantom Menace and we picked Return of the Jedi. I don't know, but it's interesting that we both
the way
picked,
they do a big battle at the end or something.
We both picked Phantom Menace. We both picked Return of the Jedi. I would think Gilleran would pick Return of the Jedi too, because I think that's her favorite original trilogy.
I think so. One other thing about Return of the Jedi that, I didn't do this with the prequel trilogy, but one of the reasons I think I pick Return of the Jedi is because if I picked episode 4 or episode 5, I feel like when I watch it, I didn't finish the story.
You need that for rewatchability?
No, not necessarily. Because obviously 1 is a pretty, I'm doing the thing now. 4, episode 4, New Hope.
The first one
is sort of a story in itself. It's got its little bubble around it. So it's not so much that, but I feel like, I know in my heart that that's just like the first one. And if I watch the middle one, I'm like, okay, I watched like part of the story. But something about like when I put on the third one, by the time I get to the end of it, I feel like I watched all 3 of them.
That's fair.
Because I get that closure and I'm like, man, it all came together.
Yeah.
He saved the whole galaxy and there's the bow tie. I feel like I finished it all. And so I feel like there's a sense of accomplishment when you finish Return of the Jedi as well.
That's fair. That's a good point. All right. So let's take it now to the sequel trilogy. This one I'm still not even sure on. So I may have to talk this out.
All right.
It's not Last Jedi. I know that. It's one of the JJ movies. That's to no surprises to anybody. I'm a big JJ fan. I'm just not sure if it's TFA or Rise of Skywalker for me. I'm leaning TFA just because of Han Solo, and because I just think that's a really solid and good Star Wars movie. So I think that's where I am, but I'm not positive. Do you have a definitive one for sequel trilogy?
So I do. And it's funny because the one that I think is actually the best out of the 3, being Force Awakens, is the least likely one for me to throw on.
Oh, interesting.
And the reason that is for that other thing that I keep mentioning as we move along. It just is the strongest in the sequel trilogy of like, when I put on The Force Awakens, all of a sudden now it's background and I don't watch it. Yeah, I know it so inherently, probably because something about like my brain, and like I went and saw the movie like 7 or 8 times in the theater, that like something about it goes, I've already seen this before. I know this. And so I sort of I can put it on, but it immediately falls to background and I'm not really paying attention to it or getting pulled into it. Whereas with both Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, when I put those on, I outside of watching the movie refer to them as like kind of tough to get into. But then when I actually put them on, it reminds me of how great Star Wars is. I'm like, why does this movie have a bad rap? It's so cool. Watch this scene. That's Finn. That's Phasma. They're fighting. I love this. You know? This is so cool. Like, I'm like, that's Zori Bliss. And this was the end of the whole thing. And like, when she does this thing, and like, there's so much about those two movies that still have this raw sort of like, yeah, I heard it was a bad movie, so I never watched it. And then you like put it on and you're like, I don't know what everybody's talking about. This movie's great. You know, like both of those movies do that for me. And so I do have such a hard time picking between them. I think for the same reason that I do the Return of the Jedi, I think I lean towards Rise of Skywalker because it has that effect of when you get to the end, I'm like, wow, like we just went on a whole big thing. But I don't know, man. I don't want to say it's Last Jedi because I really feel like that's not the true answer. But there really is something about like when I put on Last Jedi, I get pulled into it, and then I look at the aspects that Ryan really nailed, and I'm like, man, like the kid, what do they call him? Broom kid or whatever. Like there's just this, like, he lifts Tamiri it up and he's looking at the sky and all that. I'm like, this is so cool. I love all of this. And why did this get such a bad reputation? There's something that makes me feel good about those two movies in particular. Like they got this sort of like rotten score on Tomatoes, and I like them. I like those movies, and I have good times with them.
Last Jedi had great critic scores, bad audience, and Rise of Skywalker had bad critics, great audience.
Right.
You're convincing me on Rise of Skywalker a bit, and because I just like, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about
it's not Last Jedi, that's for sure.
Well,
I like
Last Jedi for me, I liked the Last Jedi.
You associate with other things what happened
to the fandom, and and I think it's a slower movie, and usually slower movies aren't as rewatchable for me. Mm-hmm. I like when things move. That's why I love Indiana Jones movies so much, but
and let me jump in here too. So like, I know you said during Return of the Jedi, it's one of the ones where you can watch and you notice different things. That I feel like is why I like Canto Bight. Is I feel like it gets talked about and skipped over a lot, and it's fair. I understand the arguments. I see both sides and everything. But Canto Bight, to me, when I'm watching it, there's something special in me that's like, I like, how did they do that guy? Oh, that's so cool. She's got 3 heads or whatever, I'm like, looking at they do that big long shot, and I'm like, this is all so cool, like a high-end casino cantina type.
Fathiers start blast through and run over the tables, and it's a great Star Wars scene. I think I'd like to
visit that casino in real life. I feel like Finn, I put myself in Finn's position.
Oh, Lando's been there, you know it.
For sure.
I want to change the narrative on that scene, because I do sometimes give it flack, but I give it for the wrong reasons. It's not Canto Bight, it's not Cantonica. I want to see more of that planet. It's not the aliens, because it's like one of the bigger, like, here's a lot of creatures scenes in the sequel trilogy.
It might be of all of them.
I think the only shift I would make, and I think I've said this on the podcast before, is I wish Poe went with Finn. And that would have been, we still have 2 characters together in the second movie, and they're not in 3 different spots. And that would have made Rise of Skywalker better, because you would have had 2 of the characters together. And I'm not saying Rose didn't have to go. She could have gone. Like, I'm whatever. But I think if Poe and Finn were there, it would have been maybe a little funnier. You would have got to see more out of Poe as opposed to him being beholden to being on that ship the whole time, getting scolded. But the scene itself, I think, is very good. So I agree. That is something I want to revisit. And that actually would be a great candidate scene for our new segment that we put out. Did you see that? You know?
Yeah. And I'm considering too, like I said, I rewatched Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm like, we should do Did You See That for some of the shows too?
Oh yeah.
The movies.
Yeah. I agree. And it seems most people enjoy the segment, so we appreciate that. But I'm leaning Rise of Skywalker on this one because it does move, and that movie actually moved me. I got pretty sentimental in a lot of spots. I remember the Han and Ben Solo scene, and then the end with Rey. There was a lot in the music. I thought Williams did a really good job with the friendship theme and a lot of things he incorporated. But also just like I'm thinking about that Death Star lightsaber battle. That has to be like a top 3 lightsaber battle for me. That is so raw and so good, and the scale that they made that was an epic lightsaber fight. It just, and like people say like they played it safe and stuff. I feel like that movie took so many big risks, like the Force, fighting through the Force. I think that movie is going to age really well. And I think people, when they step away from it and zoom out, maybe in 10 years or so, you're going to get those articles about how Rise of Skywalker was actually a good movie on, Gizmodo or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think when people zoom out, they're going to see that movie does sort of live on its own and take its risks and still lands the plane. Now, people aren't going to like it, who don't like it now aren't going to like it, forever. Maybe that's fine. But I don't know, something about that movie. That's the movie, when I think of all 3 of the sequel trilogy movies, that's the fullest movie. And for reasons, people said like they cut too much and they had too much, that they put too much into it. But I like that. Like, I like the Pisana stuff. Like, there's a lot to find in that scene too. I like the chase on the ice planet. I like them going to Kijimi. That is such a cool set, such a cool planet. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of movement in that movie, but it also slows down in certain spots. So I'm gonna get flack for this, but I don't care. I think I'm going Rise of Skywalker as my most rewatchable of the sequel trilogy. It might not be my favorite. I'm not sure yet.
So I gave my reasons for not Force Awakens, but why in this case, you seem like you were leaning there, but like why are you choosing that over Force Awakens? Because that movie, I'm sure, beats up your standard of like all these great things.
It's close, because I think Force Awakens might slot right under it. Like, I may be like, oh, I'm going to toss on Rise of Skywalker, and then be like, you know what? I'm going to fire up TFA right now too. Like, I don't need to watch things in order if I've already seen them. There's a lot of times I'll throw on Last Crusade and then be like, you know what? Kind of want to get some Temple of Doom going, and do that.
Right. But that's sort of similar to what I'm kind of saying about like when there's like the one that's my least favorite, and I'm kind of like, maybe, it's like, man, I've been eating so many hamburgers. Maybe I'll go for a hot dog this time, kind of thing. Like I have that one that I'm initially drawn to. That's the hamburger. But it's like, but I know that I'm going to have a good time if I eat that hot dog.
Right. And I'm just thinking, and like TFA, I'm not saying it's not rewatchable, and TLJ, like, you're convincing me to revisit things. The Canto Bight stuff. I gotta maybe look at that from a different set of lenses. But and really, it is just the characters there. I agree with you that it is a great scene. But I keep thinking about other scenes in Rise of Skywalker, like even Kylo Ren's vision when he touches the Vader helmet, and the chills I would get that I'm feeling right now. You can probably see the hairs rising of when the Vader voice comes in, join me, and like that whole flash like vision he sees. Like, there's so many cool parts of that movie, and what they did with Leia, like, and I know that doesn't necessarily contribute to rewatchability, but as I'm thinking about all these scenes, I'm like, there's a lot in that movie to really enjoy that I think people, if they just looked at, and I just remember this, I did a thread on Twitter, which I never do, about the things I love about The Rise of Skywalker.
Do you mean you did a tweet on Threads?
I did a thread on tweets, which is X. So it's an X thread that's on X, that was Twitter.
And there was a big blue sky outside, and
big blue sky outside, and people were instantly gramming about it. And there were some faces and books, and
yeah,
I was in my own space though, which was nice.
Yeah, good.
But I don't know. I made a thread, and I didn't know how long it was going to be, but it wound up being pretty long. And I realized, like, there's a lot of good to be found in every Star Wars movie, even ones you don't like. And I know that's not really this topic, but when I keep thinking about Rise of Skywalker, I almost want to go upstairs right now and watch it, and just it's a hell of a ride. And I just have a lot of fun watching that movie. And it moves so much that I can rewatch that without getting bored of it.
I wanted to sort of lean on that because there is, I think, a truth that generally when we talk about Last Jedi on the show versus when we talk about Rise of Skywalker, it's more often that I think when I'm walking back upstairs that I go, man, I kind of want to put on Rise of Skywalker right now.
Yeah.
So I was kind of leaning towards that answer. More so than Last Jedi, but both of them, like I said, the more important thing to me is when I do actually push them on, I'm engaged in both of them.
Yeah, and Lacey would say TFA, like 100%. I think.
Yeah, I think that's.
I mean, that might be her favorite
I find
Star Wars movie.
Impossible. I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, or Return of the Jedi. I forget, and you can easily make the argument about TFA, and anyone can make a good argument about any of these movies because we love them all. But are you saying it's Last Jedi for you, or are you not? Just, you don't have to make a decision. You can say, like, oh, maybe it's TLJ, maybe it's Rise of Skywalker. You know,
I think maybe because of what I was just explaining, I think more often than not, I feel the urge to watch Rise of Skywalker over Last Jedi.
Isn't this nuts?
That we're both landing on the same three.
Yeah.
I didn't think that would happen. I figured you would say Phantom Menace. I figured you would say Empire Strikes Back, and I figured you would say, this one's tough though. I kind of figured you'd say Rise of Skywalker, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I think the other one would be Force Awakens. That could have surprised me a little. Yeah.
So if we're both saying Rise of Skywalker, if we're both,
I'm
saying
more surprised by your Return of the Jedi pick, honestly.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. And then we both picked Phantom Menace. I want to see, because it's hard for us to find the patterns. I want to see, if Lacey or our audience can find any connective tissue between those picks as a pattern, as to why those movies are rewatchable. Is there something that those three movies across those three trilogies
I think we already sort of uncovered it in this conversation. To me, it's the finality of it. I like.
Okay.
I know we picked Phantom Menace, but it's got the final battle at the end, and it's sort of separated, and you can't watch Revenge of the Sith and being like, wrapped it all up. That even more so than usually the middle movie feels like they just left you on edge so you can finish it later, which was 4, 5, and 6. So I feel like the finality of, if there's one that sort of like puts a bow on something, Phantom Menace, like holding the thing up and, they're being yeah, all of that. I think that's where you see the multi-battles happen. They win and everything is good.
You can say the same thing about A New Hope though, too.
Yeah, you could.
Star Wars could have ended with A New Hope.
But the finality of Return of the Jedi is better.
Oh yes, yeah, the family photo. Yeah.
Now, John, we're going a little long, but I got another question for you. The new Star Wars trilogy is Phantom Menace, Return of the Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. Which one do you put on? Between the three, you have to sit down.
Probably Return of the Jedi.
I think it is that for me too.
Yeah.
I think it's that one.
It's interesting. Now, Are we? I thought you were gonna say we just created a new like the rewatchability trilogy, and it's the Phantom Menace. You watch Phantom Menace, then you watch Return of the Jedi, because you see young Anakin, and then you see the end of Anakin. So you get both sides of that, and then you get Rise of Skywalker, which I don't know how that plays, but you also get the start of Palpatine and both ends of Palpatine. So is this the Palpatine trilogy? I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. That would be that. I mean, he shows up in only 3 and 9.
3, 5, 6. No,
he does he does show up in 5, but let's be honest, it's 6 and 9 are the 2.
And then 1, 2, 3, of course.
Yeah, and then 1, 2, 3. Yeah, but you probably want to see Phantom Menace before you'd want to like say let's kick it off with Palpatine's trilogy.
Another
Revenge of the Sith.
Side thing, like in how they develop the Palpatine in the original trilogy. He's mentioned in the first movie. We see him briefly in the second movie, and then he's in the third movie. I wonder if that's a formula that maybe they should follow for a future villain. You know, we hear about him, and then we start speculating, who is this Emperor? And then you see him in the second one, and you get a taste, and then the third one, you get the full thing. I kind of like
that's
that.
Thrawn.
That slow burn.
We've been hearing about him in Mandalorian. You see him for the first time. What?
He was in Rebels. That's the only thing.
Well, not for most people.
All right.
But then you like he's not the main villain, but you see him and you learn more about him in Ahsoka, and then you're going to get your actual resolution with the big boss.
It's interesting
later.
Excuse me, very interesting. Yeah. All right, this is a cool chat. I dug it. Anything else before we get out of here?
I felt like there was another Bennett story that I wanted to tell, but I can't remember what it was. So we will hold off till later.
Has Bennett seen the pod race in the Phantom Menace yet?
He has not. No,
because Johnny's into monster trucks and he likes like things that go fast. I wonder if I just toss that on there, no context, been like, let's watch this race from Star Wars if he would like it. So I might try that.
Yeah, there's definitely tons of different angles that you could come at to get somebody introduced to Star Wars at a young age. And I think, I don't know about you, but I definitely know from my experience, like I always liked Star Wars until the day when like, and I'm an adult, like decided I'm going to really like Star Wars. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
Like, I think most people are probably like, yeah, I like Lord of the Rings. And then like one day they like, you know what? I'm going to like really read it, you know, and like get into it or something.
Or like a sport, like say soccer, you know?
I don't see your connection.
All right. Well, we want to thank everybody for listening and watching and being a part of TRB. Let us know what you think of our picks. We want to know for you, what are your most rewatchable Star Wars movies? There's no wrong answers because it's your choice. You're the one sitting on your couch saying, I'm going to throw on a Star Wars movie. It's a rainy Saturday. Let's get into it. So let us know your picks in the comments or hit us up if you're a patron in the Discord chat, where we'll definitely be talking about that there. And of course, email if you don't want everybody to know your picks. But speaking of Patreon, James said at the top, it keeps the light on in the base. It keeps us going. It allows us to keep doing what we're doing, but also aspire to do more as we grow and as we're going to get hit with new Star Wars shows, movies, and stuff down the line. It is immensely important to the success of the show because it's just the three of us running the deal here, and your support is immensely important. So thank you to all of our patrons, but also anybody who listens to the show. However you contribute, whether that's telling people about the pod, wearing a t-shirt, just enjoying it yourself. Anyway, we thank you all. But I do, before we get out of here, want to do a special shout out to our generals and spice runners on Patreon. Carmelo, John Reese, Jetta Rosewater, Frank Grande, Darth Hurricane, Nick Kratz, Chris Morales, Brian Smith, Matt Chitty, Danny, Mike Ramori, Matt Heath, Brendan McLaughlin, Count Pepto, Sneaky Zebra, Aaron Ellington, Colin Cormier, Jolt and Jedi DiMaggio, Diana, and Dave Hornack. And the Spice Runners are David Probus, Neil Shaw, Kendall Gellner, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, Michael Fry, and the Fort Worthian. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We had a fun time doing it, I think, James, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lacey will be back with us for TRB Live later this week, of course. She'll be back on Thursday night. For me, Johnny Hoey on Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, and of course my movie podcast, Just Like the Movies. We're doing Airplane next, and we just did Titanic a couple weeks ago. James, how about you?
You know, I had been wanting to rewatch Titanic for a very long time, and because you said you were going to do it, I rewatched it and then had to wait like a month before your episode.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Well,
but I wanted to go on record too, because I know you guys kind of talked about it a little bit, but I do actually have this feeling that Titanic is in contention for one of the best movies ever made.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And it's tough because I know you guys talked about it, but like you can roll your eyes all you want at this aspect of it or not, but like, I mean, it's sort of that same argument I gave for like Endgame, where people are like, oh, it shouldn't be nominated for Best Picture, and I'm like, the award is for achievement in filmmaking, and I'm sorry, but like Titanic is probably the ultimate achievement in filmmaking as far as like what it took to make that movie.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Like all the aspects of like making that it actually come to life. It's
crazy.
It's quite incredible. So yeah.
And it swept all those awards for good reason.
It may not be the best movie, but it might be the best movie ever made.
Dude, James Cameron is on another planet. Like he's just
on Pandora.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. He's unobtainium. Yeah. All right. And then Lacey, of course, as we said at the top, Lacey Gilleran, pretty much everywhere except TikTok. I believe it's Lacey Gilleran. But at Lacey Gilleran, hit her up. And she'll be back with us, like I said, on Thursday. But thanks again, everybody. Spread the word, subscribe, all that good stuff. But we hope you're all doing well, more importantly, as Ahsoka comes out later this month. But always keep it right here with us, and we'll see you next time with another episode of TRB. We'll see you around, kids.